The following presentation is brought to you without commercial interruption by our patrons over at patreon.com/addressinggettysburg. When you can't make it out to Gettysburg, we want to bring Gettysburg to you, and we can only do that with more support from our listeners. So please consider becoming a patron over at patreon.com/addressinggettysburg, where you will find our premium content made exclusively for our patrons. That's patreon.com/addressinggettysburg.
Okay, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
I was wandering around.
Just standing around here. All right. Oh, it is a nice weather. All right. So, hello, everybody. I just want to let you know, originally we were going to do this on video, but Tim sent me a message this afternoon. Tim, what was the message you sent?
Well, this particular program, I didn't want to put the photographs on internet because they're all rare photographs that I'm deathly afraid will be stolen by internet trolls and used in their books, uncredited to me. And
you're not
what's really funny about this is that it does happen, but no,
you didn't. But
in
you
this
didn't
particular
take these,
program,
though, Tim, right? These are not your photographs that you've taken.
These are ones that I've collected, and a few of them. The thing about them is, a few of the photographs tonight are not owned by me; they're owned by my friends, and I don't mind showing them and talking about them. But every time I put rare photographs on the internet on one of these talks, they get reused, uncredited on various websites.
So this week, no video, just audio as always, but next week we're going to try to start bringing video in.
Yeah, and it would be great, if you could see some of the video that we're talking about. But in this topic, I'll try to explain, as we go along, some of the stuff we're looking at in the video.
But you know what, Tim? It would be great if they could see it. And you know how they can see it?
By coming here to the Farnsworth House Live and joining in on our Sunday night Civil War roundtables.
Exactly. Enjoy the show, ladies and gentlemen.
You're listening to Addressing Gettysburg.
Okay, so we're going to start the program now. I keep tripping over the plant. Okay, so tonight's program is called Early Commercialization. Can't even say it. I should have called it commercialism. And I thought about what I would talk about when I came up with the idea for the topic, and it looks like I divided it up into different topics. I divided it up into early relic collectors, motels and hotels, early hotels. Then we have battlefield guides, amusement parks, the electric trolley, and battlefield photographers. So I covered different subjects. I don't remember which order I did what in. So we can talk about some of these early commercial enterprises that were here at Gettysburg. I don't know how many people think about it, but really, the Gettysburg Address on November 19th, 1863 was really Gettysburg's first commercial event. And you have to think about this, 15,000 people attended the ceremony, by some accounts. Other accounts have it as 20 or 30,000. It's hard to say how many of those people actually stayed in town. But, some people came in by train, and they needed a place to stay, and they needed a place to eat. And so, Gettysburg got a taste of what it was like to be really busy with outside tourism and visitors. Now, George Arnold owned a store in the center of town. And there's a great letter that he wrote to a soldier in the Army, a guy named William T. King, who was a tailor, had a tailor shop in the back of Arnold's clothing store. And on the square, which is now the Adams County National Bank, that place. And this letter mentions that the Gettysburg, they're going to have a cemetery. There's going to be a big dedication ceremony. And he mentions in the letter that this is going to be a boom for Gettysburg's economy, and everyone in Gettysburg is going to be able to take advantage of the fact that lots and lots of visitors are coming into town. And there's going to be an opportunity to make money off of those visitors. I should mention with George Arnold, generally you don't think about it, he's not necessarily always connected with it. But George Arnold had an idea to build a tower on the battlefield and have money charge admission for people to go up in the tower. And this wasn't a tower built in the 1970s. This is a tower built in the 1870s. And it was called the Battlefield Prospect Tower. And this is actually a stock certificate with coupons to make money back on your stock that George Arnold put out. It's owned by Sue Boardman. At the Adams County Historical Society, we also have a stock document. So he went around town, he sold stock in his idea, he gathered the money together, and he built a huge wooden tower on East Cemetery Hill. And it was built in 1878. And it actually stood until 1896, when it was torn down to make room for the Winfield Scott Hancock Memorial. So if you know where that is on East Cemetery Hill. So it was torn down. And of course, by that time, it had been there, for almost 20 years, and it was getting a little bit old. But it was built on Gettysburg Battlefield Memorial Association property. So George Arnold made a deal with the GBMA, as we call it, to put the tower there. So it was a commercial enterprise that was on part of the land that was already preserved. And this is something that I think has been interesting through Gettysburg history. Commercialization goes hand in hand with battlefield preservation. So the forces of commercialization and memorialization were always competing with each other. And sometimes it's difficult when you look at these commercial enterprises to see whether their intentions are good or their intentions are bad. And I think in our own minds, we each have an idea of if something is good for the battlefield or something is bad. Like, if you ask me, ghost tour, bad. But who am I to say? Because I give tours and I make money talking about the battle off of the, dead soldiers, the soldiers that died here. So, somebody might accuse the battlefield guides of taking advantage of the situation. And I think when you look at some of these enterprises, some of them actually start off as really well-intentioned things, and then as time goes by, they become more and more of a drain on what is a valuable battlefield entity. Well, we'll talk about that as we go around. Look at the sign in front of the tower on East Cemetery Hill. Don't miss a view of the great battlefield from the top of the observatory. And this is the sentence Gary likes to pronounce as me, he says.
Right.
It is grand beyond imagination. Now, you have to hear Gary say it.
You didn't do it well.
Yeah, I didn't do it the way Gary does me.
Right.
So I should tell you that there were certain times of the day where you paid admission to the tower, and I think it was a nickel. And for 25 cents at certain times, there was a battlefield guide at the top of the tower that would enlighten you about what you could see from the top of the tower. It's hard for me to imagine that just being 40 feet above East Cemetery Hill is grand beyond imagination. But that tower was there during the heyday of their early battlefield visitation. And, there was a veterans encampment on East Cemetery Hill almost every year between 1878 and 1890. So you can see in this particular encampment, which I don't remember the date of this one, but it's just one of those veterans encampments during the summer, during that time period. This view is taken looking towards town from the top of the battlefield observatory. So veterans actually camped on the grounds of East Cemetery Hill. Now, you probably know that immediately after the battle, there were all kinds of problems in Gettysburg. The 170,000 people occupied an area that's normally occupied by 2,000 or 3,000 people. And 70,000 animals, mules, horses, donkeys, ate all the food, they drank all the water, and then both armies left. 20,000 wounded soldiers were in the town. They had to be cared for, they had to be fed. They occupied every building in the town and all the farmhouses around the battlefield. And then the federal government came in and there were military guards here. They tried to clean up the battlefield. The local people bore the burden of caring for the wounded, and the dead were buried all over their fields. As I like to say about the farms, their crops are destroyed, their animals are killed, their houses are used as hospitals, and their fields are used as graveyards. And there was no compensation given to these people whatsoever by the federal government. As a matter of fact, most people looked on the Gettysburg civilians as, what are they complaining about? The soldiers were here to defend them. Even though they destroyed their property in the process, they saved them from the rebel horde. Which, that part might be true. So after the battle, a lot of these people's livelihoods were destroyed. They had mortgages on their houses. A lot of people lost their farms. Their crops were destroyed. They weren't making any money. And one of the ways they could make money is to take advantage of all the tourists that were coming in. And immediately, there were tourists coming into the area. And so they sold them things. Hey, what do you have on your property that's valuable? Guns and swords and artillery shells and bullets, relics of the battle. And immediately, tourists wanted to buy things associated with the battle and the battlefield. Pieces of trees with bullets in them. So the kids went out and they hunted relics on the battlefield. And you probably know this story, but kids got really good at selling artillery shells. But no one would buy a live artillery shell, so the kids defused the shells. They unscrewed the fuse and dumped the black powder out. But as the months went by after the battle, and the shells were out in the rain, the brass fuse started to corrode on the iron shell. And the kids started to bang them against the rocks to try to loosen up the brass cap. And there are several instances, maybe 5, where an artillery shell explodes and someone is killed, trying to get the fuse out. And again, why are these kids doing it? To make money for their families that need money? It's kind of sad in that respect. We call it deadly souvenirs. But that's not what we're going to talk about at the moment. We're going to just talk about the commercialism of selling artifacts to people. Here's a great, this is the lobby of the Springs Hotel from a magazine article, and I think it's from like 1870. And it shows kids trying to sell tourists cannonballs and bayonets and stuff like that. Isn't that fascinating to be a kid at that time and gather stuff up and then sell it? Another thing is kind of interesting that you might not know is that the federal government frowned upon this. And immediately after the battle, the quartermaster and the provost marshal were arresting civilians. So if you go on your property that you own and you pick up a sword that was dropped by a soldier and you sell it, you get arrested for selling government property. But if there's a dead soldier beside that sword and he's buried in your land, the federal government doesn't own the dead soldiers. The rebel dead were left on the people's farm fields for 10 years. Don't you think the dead soldiers in the battle should be the federal government's property too? Now, I should tell you, I'm saying all this, but I am not anti-government. Far from it. But it does seem unfair for the treatment the local people got after the battle. Okay. So one of my favorite things is canes. Did you ever see battlefield canes? Carved out of wood from the battlefield. Preferably with a bullet sticking in the cane somewhere. And you find these photographs of the kids carving and selling canes. Here's a great one. What do you think of that? So it was a business around town. Kids can get into carving canes, walking sticks. And you can buy these. They're available, you know. Usually the canes, I see them for somewhere between $100 and $300. Who knows how many thousands of canes were carved. They usually have pictures on that. Here I am. We have one at the Adams County Historical Society. Oh, who took that photograph? Did you take that photograph? I needed, if you spin it around just a little more, Jenny Wade is on it. You see Jenny Wade in the middle down there? They carved her face on the canes. Or they
can't get good help anymore.
No. Or they would carve like Cemetery Hill or Culp's Hill, where it came from, on the cane. And we have a few of them at the Historical Society, and it's interesting to see these collectibles. Now there were people, not just individual kids, or there were people around town that made a business out of this, selling artifacts on the battlefield. The best thing to do is to employ kids. I mentioned him in a program we had last week or the week before, but I was really good friends with Jim Tate. He guided for 67 years or something like that. He died in his 90s, not too long ago. And when he was a kid, he said he and his friends that Rosensteel, that had the museum, would just drive his car up and down the Hancock Avenue, and he would send the kids out in the field looking for bullets and belt buckles and anything they could find, pieces of artillery shells, and he would bring them up to the car and he would buy them from them. And the park didn't even legislate that at that time. You were allowed to do that. So there's a guy named John Good. I'm not sure exactly when he made his first appearance in Gettysburg, but this is from an 1890s newspaper advertisement, and John Good is standing in front of a cart that he pushes around, and on the cart he sells artillery shells and bullets and battlefield canes and souvenirs made from battlefield wood. And John Good's pretty famous. He made desk sets, so you could buy sets. And here's two of them, desk sets that we have at the Adams County Historical Society that are from John Good. And if you want to do something interesting, Google that on the internet. John Good, Gettysburg souvenir, and you'll see that these things are highly collectible. And one of these things today, they're amongst, if they can be proven that they're from John Good, he wrote his name or wrote Gettysburg in a certain way, they sell for $1,200 to $1,500. There was another guy, well, not yet, let me finish this guy. Oh, this is, I think this is not John Good, but this is another guy named Edward Woodward. And Edward Woodward, his family came to the society, because we have this one for Edward Woodward. And his family came and asked questions about him, and I did some research on him. He came to Gettysburg immediately after the battle from Baltimore. He was a blacksmith, a gunsmith, opened up a shop here, and he specialized in selling these desk sets. And these things, like I said, you look on the internet, his name's George Woodward, and then there's John Good, and you can find his stuff for sale. Now, John Good, at the National Park, they have one of his relic boards. He made relic boards. Does anybody remember in the old National Park Service Museum, the old Rosenstiel building, if you walked in the back to the entrance of the electric mat, they had 5 or 6 of these lined up on the wall. I've asked several times why they don't have them out anymore. But if you think about the museum, there is no place in the museum where they cover that topic, so they don't have them available. But here's one that's like 6 feet tall. It has a rifle on them, and it has John Good's name associated with it. So he would get a sort of a box, a shadow box, put artifacts in it, and sell it. And there are a lot of these around, and these things really sell for a lot of money. And I think Eric Dorr has one up at the Gettysburg Museum of History. If you want to check it out, you can see some of these types of artifacts. And here, there's advertisements for John Good. John Gettysburg Battlefield Novelty Works. John A. Good, J.A. Good, proprietor. Souvenirs made from all interesting points on the battlefield. Relics and fancy turning. He had a lathe. So that's what that means. And he made furniture. And we have this really cool photograph. No one's ever had it in their books or on display. And it's the Gettysburg Novelty Works. And so this is where John Good made his furniture and made his battlefield artifacts. And it was a building that was down very close to where you live, Melissa, all the way down on West Middle Street on the left-hand side. So I see it in photographs, but I don't know when the building got removed. And I don't know exactly if it was on a ridge or the next street closer to Seminary Ridge. But it's out there somewhere. And here's an advertisement for his chairs. His wicker chairs. The Gettysburg chair. Got to have chairs. Penrose Myers was another guy who got interested in battlefield relics and sold them. He sold souvenirs, fancy souvenirs. And he's one of the pioneers that started selling postcards around town. And he had a shop. I meant to put it in here, but I didn't. He had a shop on 21 Baltimore Street, which today is the barber shop, I believe. So if you go up to
other side of the street. Odd numbers on this side.
Oh, okay. Maybe it's 22 then. You're right.
Where Surfings was, maybe.
Yeah, this is where the barber shop is, though. This guy's place. So I had to. Oh, is it on here? Now it says number 10 Baltimore Street on that advertisement. That's not even the right numbering system there. So anyway, there's pictures of it. He was also a jeweler, and he came up with the idea of selling spoons, big collector's items. And here's an advertisement for another guy in town sold spoons, Blocker. Blocker was also a jewelry store. Blocker went in business with Tipton for a while. This spoon, solid silver, $1.50. Seems like a lot, doesn't it? Now, I don't know if anybody has them, but I have one. The Farnsworth House used to sell lead spoons with the house on them on the top and a little spoon at the bottom. Yeah. I have one, and I was showing them here. They don't even have them here anymore. But also with Penrose Myers, I wanted to mention, he's also the one who, in the 1890s, he moved up onto Seminary Ridge, and he had a souvenir stand at Oak Ridge, right near the Oak Ridge Tower. And I had pictures. I didn't put that in here, but I have pictures of that. But here's some Blocker. You see you selling some really nice engraved plates. Then we have, on the cheaper end, you can come here and buy expensive souvenirs, but you got to have something that's going to sell to, everyday people. And this guy Spies, And Spies is kind of interesting. He had a pottery, and his pottery is on Seminary Ridge. And he bought the pottery from a guy named Pfalzgraf. And then Pfalzgraf moved over to West York. And of course, Pfalzgraf today is still there, and they sell really, really fancy plates, dishes. But Spies was making stuff really cheap. And he did a little canteen, really small canteen, and a Gettysburg jug. And you could buy the canteen with General Meade's photograph on it or Jenny Wade's image on it. Everybody wants a Jenny Wade. And we have a Jenny Wade canteen at Historical Society, but these are the ones I had access to real quick with photographs. And here, these things are about the size of a quarter. And you can see General Meade's profile on the canteen and the Gettysburg jug. I just think they're fascinating. He also made out of pottery kind of a red clay monument, replicas of monuments. And his replicas might be better than the replicas sold up the street currently by that guy. His stuff is really bad. He'll probably hear that. But, so they're kind of, can you imagine? I don't know what kind of selection he had. I've never seen like all his stuff laid out. But you can buy, this is the New Hampshire Sharpshooter Monument in front of the Pennsylvania Monument. Isn't that wild? And I like his Reynolds statue. He's got a Reynolds statue in the 143rd Pennsylvania. These are ones from the Historical Society. But I've seen a bunch of them. And, so this guy's making them. And they're affordable. They're not made out of any kind of expensive material. But we have a bunch of examples of it in our collection. Now, they had shops where they sold these artifacts out of. And then other people came up with the idea to have the artifacts not just for sale, of course they did sell stuff, but so that the people would come and see them. You have to draw the people into your shop so you have a museum. And this is the Danner Museum, really one of the first museums in Gettysburg. And this little red brick house, and the sign says, Battlefield Museum, J.A. Danner. This little museum was next to the Fahnestock store. And today, that building no longer exists against the side of the Fahnestock house. That's where, if you go by the Fahnestock house and look to the left, there's always like some people sitting on the bench smoking. Oh, yeah. So everybody knew that right away. And you walk by that window and the cat looks out at you. Uh-huh. But it was there for a time, and then it moved across the street. Before I show that, here is Joel B. Danner. Joel B. Danner, I think his name is Joel Buchanan Danner, and then he had a son, Joel A. Danner. And they both had the Danner Museum. And Joel B. Danner is standing out in front of the Fahnestock house. We're looking to the square, and he's standing in front of his museum. And there's a pump out in front of it, and on the pump is the actual message that Juba Early wrote for supplies when he came into town on June 26th. And then there's that trough that Juba Early's horse supposedly drank out of. That's a whole different program. But then his shop moved across the street for a while. And this is where the Apple building is now. Now it's called the Lincoln Building. They put Abraham Lincoln on it. So on our right would be, it's a winery now. And I guess in there is a comic book store. It's a different building now. Also, Mumper's photographic studio was in that building for a time. See the big gigantic window of the photographic studio? And I like in this photograph, this is Charles Tyson Tipton beside the guy with the dog. That's William Tipton's son. So, if you're into the Tiptons. I don't know, these people are not identified in this photograph, and I don't know many of them. But there's the Danner Museum on that side of the street. And here's Joel A. Danner. And look, Free Battlefield Museum. Oh, yeah, and it's possible the addresses aren't the same as they are today. Yeah, but there you go, 28. But free battlefield museum. See, because once you get the people in there, then you can sell them some relics. Now, some of the relics in this museum, after it closed down, ended up at the state. And the state of Pennsylvania, the Pennsylvania State Museum has a large collection of relics. And on this list of stuff, let's see, leaning against the side of the case down on the right is John Burns' musket, a musket owned by John Burns. Not the one he carried in the battle, but owned by him. And these shells are numbered with a certain kind of paint, and people love these shells because you can see the numbers and then you can read the list and it tells you where they're from. And there are shells sold in the relic stores around town that appear in this image. Although maybe I've seen 3 shells for each number. Buying artifacts is really tough because, you have to rely on the provenance. But some people are just really enthusiastic about the Danner shells and they collect them. And they become very collectible. Danner shells, if they're really solid and, it can be proven that that's the shell in one of these photographs, they sell for like $1,000 each. And here's a couple other photographs we have from inside the Danner Museum. So I guess you go in and look, there's one of those relic down here on the, let's see, I should have brought my pointer down here. There's one of those relic boards. But every shell and every artifact on display in the museum has a story. It came from the Rose Farm, or it came, from the McPherson Farm, or it came from the railroad cut. It's fascinating.
You think all those are accurate?
Oh, now that's another issue.
Right?
Yeah.
You found 15 shells, you're not going to say they all came from the same place. It's going to reduce your value.
Yeah. Yeah. And so Danner actually was one of the shops you could go to, and you could get a battlefield pocket guide. So, you have people coming into shops, they're visitors, and you publish and you sell a book that is a tour of the battlefield. Isn't that a great idea? So you can become a visitor center prior to there being any such thing as a visitor center. And you're near the square of Gettysburg, and how are people coming into town?
Train.
They're coming by train. And they walk up to your shop, they shop in your shop, they buy your stuff, or they go to the hotel where you also sell a book, and they can, take a tour of the battlefield of the book. Also, I like this. The Springs Hotel, the Catalyst and Springs Hotel, it had a bathhouse, and also they bottled and sold water. Water that had a medicinal property to it that would actually make you healthy if you drank the water in great quantities. And they would sell you bottles of this Gettysburg water. Look at that, $3.50 per 5-gallon demijohn. What a demijohn? I don't even know what that is. 5 gallons. And then you see Danner is selling them at the Museum of Rare Relics and Curiosities. Does he have a piece of General Custer on display like the guy up here did?
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. He had a mermaid too. Remember that? What was his name? What was his museum? Doc. Okay. He's not there anymore. I saw him recently though. Doc Wetzel. Good. Doc Wetzel. You can look that up. Doc Wetzel. So then we have, the Danner Museum's not around. The oldest continuously operational museum in the town of Gettysburg is the Jenny Wade House Museum. 1901. So it's been there 120 years. Isn't that something? And then, of course, it's not a museum anymore. I used to tell people this. General Lee's, like 1917, 1918, General Lee's headquarters. And I don't know, you had to have been in it like 15 or 20 years ago before they redid it. And it was incredible with all the relics everywhere in it. But then they redid it, and it wasn't the same. And then, of course, it sold, and then the owner sold everything in it. Now it's, of course, owned by the Civil War Trust. But it was a free museum. So, what's interesting about Gettysburg? Now we're going to go to another topic. And I should tell you that I have stuff up to the current day on each of these topics we could talk about, but that's another program I decided. We're going to do modern Gettysburg commercialism. When I say modern, I mean like from the 1960s to the present day. Things I remember. But Gettysburg is well suited to be a tourist attraction. Wasn't it convenient to fight the largest battle of the Civil War in an area whose infrastructure was already established to accept tourists? We had 10 roads that led into the town. We have a railroad that can bring people into the town. We have 6 major hotels already established. And we are the center of a thriving carriage industry. The Civil War destroyed Gettysburg's economy. But after the Civil War, it was not difficult to convert the tourist industry, or I should say convert the carriage industry into wagons and carriages that would take people around the battlefield, and all the livery stables associated with hotels opened up, and all of them were able to have tour guides taking people around the field, and we already had all these hotels. How convenient is that? And it makes you think about, understand why places like Shiloh never enjoyed heavy visitation until much more recently, or, even Antietam for that matter. Places that don't have, places to stay. Of course, we had to establish some other ones besides the ones that already were here. Oh, I love the pumpkin fritters. So here in this view, you can see an 1867 view of the bathhouse at the Kettleson Springs Hotel. And basically, the story is very simple. After the battle, soldiers were wounded, and they crawled over to the spring near Willowbys Run. And some soldiers noticed that bathing their wounds started to heal. The water had medicinal qualities to it. This is the story they're telling now. And so they started to market this. And people would buy the water and drink it, and they would come here and take a bath at the bathhouse. And it was very popular. A guy named Emanuel Harmon came up with this idea, just at the base of Willowbys Run, where the Gettysburg Country Club used to be. But that wasn't enough. They got some investors together, and besides the bathhouse, they built the Gettysburg Springs Hotel. And here, it opened up in June of 1869, is General George Gordon Meade drinking some water. Now, do you drink the water, the same water that the people take baths in? I'm a little unclear about that. Here's another view of the bathhouse and the Springs Hotel. And you can see this is from July 1869, Harper's Weekly. They were announcing the opening of it. So they built a huge hotel. The hotel was massive. And you know what's interesting? The hotel was built in the middle of the first day's battlefield. I mean, soldiers charged across that area of the hotel during the battle. It's not very far from where General James Archer was captured. The Confederates were driven back across that area. The Iron Brigade charged across that area. People died under the spot where the building was built. But a lot of people looked at it like, hey, we're preserving the area where the battle was fought. A road was built to lead out to that spot, and veterans who fought in the battle came to stay at the Springs Hotel. In 1869, a few months after it opened, well, less than a month, they had a reunion of veterans of the Northern and Southern Army that wanted to attend. Robert E. Lee was invited to attend the ceremony, or the discussion. and they talked. John Batchelor, a historian, asked them questions about things that happened on the battlefield. So this commercial enterprise was a step into preserving the area where the battle was actually fought, which is interesting, since it was built right on the spot. Of course, we could say the same thing about the Cyclorama Center in the 1960s being built right on the spot of Pickett's charge. Whose idea was that? Let's destroy the thing we need to interpret. So here is, I have lots of views of the Springs Hotel. It was just a massive, massive hotel. And it existed from 1869. It was active in 1913. Veterans stayed there during the 50th anniversary. But it kind of fell into disrepair, and it was abandoned. And it kept changing owners. It was owned throughout its life by a consortium of different investors, not from here, from Baltimore, New York, and Philadelphia at different times. And it burned in a horrible fire in 1918. And you can see lots and lots of different photographs of it. Oh, and here's an advertisement for it. Gettysburg Springs Hotel, situated on the battlefield near the famous Catalysine Springs. Oh, that's interesting. The only first-class hotel in the vicinity of Gettysburg. Yeah, there's horrible hotels downtown. Don't stick to those. Here at the Historical Society, we even have a menu. It tells you what they serve at the hotel. And I like the design on it. You can see the springs, the Catalysine Springs at the bottom. And this word Catalysine is just made up. It's a made-up word. Okay, so it's not even a real word. Now here is an interesting photograph from the cupola of the Springs Hotel looking east towards Willowbys Run. And it's really hard to make out the features of the battlefield. There's a road running over the Chambersburg Pike, but you get a good view of the bathhouse and the area surrounding the bathhouse.
I'm sorry, just
go ahead.
Give us a minute here to look at this.
So we're actually, let me see if I can stand over here for a minute. Willowbys Run goes right through here. There's actually a road that goes over across the run and goes up and comes out on the Chambersburg Turnpike. The guide station would be like right here. And so this is the edge of the Reynolds woodlot or the McPherson woodlot. And there's a road that runs on the other side of Willowbys Run also. These features today are very difficult to find, and I have tried many times to line this up. My favorite part of this photograph I'm going to talk about in a moment, though, is down to the very left bottom, and that's the horse-drawn trolley of the Springs Hotel.
If you blow that up, can you see any of the McPherson buildings?
No. It's a good version of it. Here's another view from the cupola, and this looks across the middle of what is now, the area of the Gettysburg Country Club and across Willowbys Run. And that farm out in the distance is the Herbst farm, the John Herbst farm. So we're looking towards Big Round Top down in the distance. And you kind of can, it's kind of faded out. And that road running through the middle of the photograph is right in the middle of the country club property. And they're doing their laundry at the Springs Hotel, you can see. I like that view. Now, to get to the Springs Hotel, there was a road, but there was also a horse-drawn trolley. And the abutment of the bridge for the trolley is still there along Willowbys Run. As a matter of fact, the last I've heard, now this could change, that when they put a walking path from McPherson's Ridge over across to the country club property, which they're planning on doing, their plan is to rebuild that and just put a walking bridge over the Springs Hotel Bridge, which I'm very excited about.
Over the existing abutment?
The abutments, yeah. The abutments are still there.
Yeah.
So that's, we don't have a lot of this kind of stuff around. Like relics of the commercialization of the battlefield, I know, it's not as exciting as I think it is, I'm sure. The bathhouse is in the middle, you see in the upper, or the middle right of the photograph, see the bathhouse? And that octagonal building, there's still remnants of that, and that's where the water actually comes up into the stream. And you can go down, you can get on the Willowbys Run. How about that? As homework for everyone, go to Willowbys Run, go to the 26th North Carolina Memorial, walk the trail down the hill behind it, and find the abutments of the bridge. Now, I got to tell you, the horse-drawn trolley is something that really, I'm into the trolley anyway, but I love the horse-drawn trolley. Really into it. And so here I had that one view where I could see it in the bottom left-hand corner, and I have the drawing of it there, and see horses pull the trolley. And let me tell you this, if you don't know this, the trolley went to the train station in Gettysburg. It picked people up at the train, the one on Carlisle Street.
The Western Maryland? Not the Western Maryland?
No, the one on Carlisle Street, see, that's not until 1884.
Okay.
The one on Carlisle Street, it picked people up, they came up to the square, they went around the square, out Chambersburg Street, a horse-drawn trolley, and then it went across a brand new avenue they built for the trolley called Springs Avenue. And then it went out where the Y is, and then went across the front of the seminary, and then turned again, and went out a road across Willowbys Run. Now, a friend of mine, John Fuss, a battlefield tour guide, died. And his daughter asked me to go out to her house and look at stuff that he had left. And I knew John really well. And I had no idea. I had a collection of stereo cards from the Springs Hotel from the 1860s. And one of the images showed the horse-drawn trolley. And I was able to get a nice close-up view of it. This is like the nerdiest thing ever. Yeah. But there's an image of the... See, it even says Gettysburg Springs Hotel on it. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah. What's the bottom say? Bottom of it say behind Gettysburg?
It looks like Railroad Company. Gettysburg Springs Railroad Company. So Gettysburg Springs Hotel. Gettysburg Springs Railroad Company. And so, to get to this nice hotel, you came by train, and they picked you up at the station with the horse-drawn trolley. Isn't that wild? Now, the problem with the Springs Hotel was it wasn't owned by people from here. It wasn't enough that they made money, on the people that were coming here. The Gettysburg Springs Hotel was closely associated with the veterans movement to preserve the battlefield. The Gettysburg Battlefield Memorial Association. Well, the Springs Hotel Company investors got wind that there was going to be a national park at Gettysburg in the 1890s. So what did they do? They went around and they bought up pieces of farmland cheaply from the locals. And then when the federal government announced that they were going to open up the Gettysburg National Military Park, and specifically when they were building Confederate Avenue, the Gettysburg Springs Hotel Company owned the land that the park wanted to build Confederate Avenue across. And so they wanted an exorbitant price from the federal government for it. And the federal government had to condemn the land and take it from them. Of course, they still had to pay for it, but there had to be a trial so that they didn't pay an outrageous sum for it. So the Springs Hotel Company, made up of investors from other, large cities, were just speculating land that the National Park Service wanted. And so this started off as an enterprise to, bring tourists to Gettysburg and preserve the battlefield. And in the end, it was just a big sore point with the National Park Commission. One thing on this map you might notice is the Springs Hotel, I'm going to stand over here for a moment, built a pond in Willowbys Run. They dammed Willowbys Run, and they put a pond in it, or a lake they called it, and you might see it in some photographs. Like here's a photograph from Meredith Avenue looking south, and look at the lake they put in Willowbys Run. So, for the convenience of visitors, so they can have a lake to row their boats in, they destroyed Willowbys Run. Part of the battlefield. And again, these kinds of things happen over and over again in the battle between commercialization and memorialization. And I should mention that the lake was so immense that in, I think it was 1878, 2 seminary students drowned in the Springs Hotel lake. The Lutheran seminary students had bought rowboats, and they were playing like crash into each other battleship in their rowboats, and they crashed into this one boat and it overturned, and guess what? They couldn't swim, and they drowned.
Of course,
I mean,
the
in front of
the
them.
college now has a pond behind it. Okay.
Yeah. Nobody drowns in that. I bet if we look at the history, they did.
It's early yet.
Yeah. So, there were hotels in Gettysburg that were converted into tourist establishments. My favorite is the Wagon Hotel, just up the street here. The Wagon Hotel, set at the intersection of the Emmitsburg Road and the Baltimore Pike, and it converted itself into the Battlefield Hotel. I mean, that's what you do. You name something that tourists are going to recognize. It's like when you go to, what's the town there? What am I thinking of? You go down to Balls Bluff, and right on the battlefield of Balls Bluff is the Battlefield Shopping Center. You name the thing after which you destroyed. So there's a big sign there on it, and if we blew it up, it says Battlefield Hotel. And this is kind of interesting because you're staying in a hotel that has artillery shells sticking out of it, and holes in the wall, and bullet holes in it.
So the Teamsters were displaced by the tourists.
Yeah.
Where'd they go?
Yeah, we don't need Teamsters anymore. We need tourists. So here's an advertisement for the Battlefield Hotel, owned by David McCleary at that time. And you can see livery attached. The hotel is located within 100 yards of the National Cemetery. Isn't that cool? And this thing really, eventually the thing really was built onto and rebuilt. And you might know, it burned in a fire in around 1940, and then a gas station was put there that eventually became the Gateway Mini Mart. Here's another view of it from the Avenue Restaurant, looking at the side of it, to give an idea what it looked like. I like it. The Eagle Hotel was probably the nicest hotel in Gettysburg. It was on Chambersburg Street, where the 7-Eleven now is. And before the war, this was the biggest and best hotel in the town. This is prior to the war. And here's the Eagle Hotel in the 1880s. Hadn't changed much. But tourism really, this place boomed. And it just grew inside. Here's an advertisement for it. And look at this, the Eagle Hotel, where the best guides for the battlefield will be furnished free of charge. So that's kind of interesting, isn't it? And why not do that? There's no licensed battlefield guides. There's no rules early on. So your hotel employs a person that is a guide and takes you around. And part of your stay at the hotel includes getting a tour of the battlefield. That's genius, don't you think?
Is that Yingling, though?
Yeah, Yingling. Now, Yingling, not from the brewery, but Yingling, he ran the hotel there, and then for a while he ran the Springs Hotel, too, the same guy. And these hotel proprietors are not the owners. The proprietors are the people that have the tavern license and operate at that moment. And you'll notice they move all around town when you look at their advertisements. And behind the Springs Hotel was a livery stable owned by Zigler and Holtzworth. And of course, Zigler and Holtzworth are tour guides, William D. Holtzworth and Charles Zigler, and they're both veterans. And we'll talk about the tour guides here in a minute.
Wait, that's behind the Springs Hotel?
No, this is behind the Eagle. I'm sorry. So this is Washington Street.
I was going to
The
say.
florist is.
Yeah.
And also, behind the livery stable is part of the Electric Tri building. I'll never get to the Electric Tri in this room. But here you go, William T. Zigler. Oh, I said Charles Zigler, this is William T. Zigler. And he was a veteran of the battle, proprietor of Zigler and Holtzworth. And, of course, there they also have the services of Luther Minnig as the tour guide. And, if you're a tour guide, that's what you need to do. You need to associate yourself with a hotel and just work out of there. Now, theoretically, we have rules today where we're not allowed to do that. But I can tell you, every bed and breakfast in town has its own special tour guide they call, So they'll never stop that. But it was early on. Look at this. By 1913, the Eagle Hotel had incredibly expanded and prospered. There's a great story. It's a 1913 reunion where a guy in the 6th New York Cavalry comes who was on Buford's staff, and he stayed in the same room in 1913 that he stayed the night before the battle. I love that. A guy named Frank Eaton. But again, look at this. The new Eagle Hotel, capacity 400. I guess that's 400 people. But that's 400. That's a lot. And here it is in 1913 during the reunion. And you know what I would say? This was much nicer and better hotel than Hotel Gettysburg. The Eagle Hotel was always the nicest hotel in Gettysburg until it mysteriously burned down in a fire in 1960. And now the Hotel Gettysburg claims to be the nicest hotel in town. I don't know.
The college didn't.
Yeah, the college did it. And of course, the McClellan House is where the Hotel Gettysburg is. And that was an early hotel in Gettysburg. And you know what's really interesting? John H. McClellan and his brother, George W. McClellan, after the battle, started to claim that they were related to the famous General McClellan. They were cousins. I even had that a couple times, and there's just no way. I can't figure out how they're related. I'm sure they didn't know how they're related. They just had the same name. But John Burns was always sitting on the porch there. And there's a great 1865, John Trowbridge comes, and John Burns is his tour guide, taking him around the battlefield. And of course, Simon Diller ran the McClellan House for a long time. And again, you see their advertisements, expert guides to the battlefield. And you might know Simon Diller and his brothers were on 76 Pennsylvania, the Keystone Regiment. They were not at Gettysburg, but they served. And Simon Diller, he weighed like 400 pounds. There's a photograph of him with his brothers, and they're all big, huge guys. I think there might be 5 of them. And it says, the caption is, "A ton of Dillers." The Globe Inn on York Street was one of the nicer hotels. And you can see that. It was there at the time of the battle, and then later it expanded. You can see the 3rd story and the balconies. For many years, there it is again. They took some of the balconies off. You wonder how safe these things were when they built them, and then like 20 years later. And the Central Hotel on Baltimore Street. This is one you don't hear much about. The Central Hotel was where the annex for the courthouse now stands. And it was built, it was a private residence at the time of the battle, so it's built after the battle. But it went through a bunch of, renovations. The Central Hotel. James Long was a proprietor in these advertisements. And James T. Long is, again, one of our more famous battlefield tour guides. There you go, James T. Long. The renowned battlefield tour. He's renowned. Yeah. And, I'm sure you guys don't, appreciate how much I am a fan of some of these early tour guides. Like James T. Long or William D. Holtzworth or Luther Middick. The Central Hotel livery. And again, each place had a livery where they send guides out. And it says, a corps of guides thoroughly familiar with the battlefield. The problem is, there's no licensed guides. There's no training of guides. It's probably much like the ghost tours are today. With anything goes. And some of them were accused of making up stories. Like even William D. Holtzworth, who was a renowned tour guide, he's the one that came up with the story of the guy with no arms who carried the guy with no legs, to the spring at Devil's Den to thus obtain water. That just hurts my head. So there you go. Here's called the Wabash Hotel for a while, the Central Hotel. And I brought this one up because, why did I bring this up? Oh, because here it says proprietor James McCavitt on the right. And you'll also notice that McCavitt, he moved around. One year they'd be a proprietor of this hotel, then the owners would fire him and he'd go to another hotel. But how about that? The General Meade House. Yeah, did you know there was a General Meade House?
What's the European plan?
It's probably like in the movies where they change the name of the way they film. Panovision. Histovision. You know how you change it? It doesn't mean anything?
Do we know where that was?
No. Carlisle Street. I'm going to guess it's like where the Lincoln Diner is, the Washington House.
Oh, okay.
I'm going to guess. And of course I did put one in for the Washington House.
There's a Washington.
Look at that. Now we have a livery attached with competent guides. There was starting to be a problem around town with incompetent guides. And, this is going to eventually lead to licensing of the battlefield guides. I feel like I can make fun of them because I am a guide. We tend to get angry if somebody's not a guide and makes fun of us, don't we? But here's a really nice view of the Washington House. Now, the Washington House was a hotel that is at the corner of Washington and Railroad Street. This is the Lincoln Diner. So there's the Lincoln Diner. Quite a hotel in its day. During the battle, the 14th Brooklyn had their hospital there.
Right at the train.
Now the trolley. I'll stop after the trolley, take a break here. But, so we have the Gettysburg Electric Railway. Simple story. A guy from Hummelstown, no connection to Gettysburg, gets a group of railroad guys together and says, hey, let's invest in a trolley. So they come to Gettysburg and they decide on a route and they secretly negotiate with property owners. They get themselves a local guy who happens to be the president of the town council, who's a enterprising businessman, and he helps them buy property around the town, William Tipton. And then William Tipton pushes an act through the town council that allows them to use the streets in the town for free. They're going to be riding a trolley in the middle of the streets where there's kids playing and there's horses and wagons, and they don't have to pay for it at all. And then they get a piece of property from one of Tipton's friends, Zigler, up near Washington Street, and they build a powerhouse. And then in 1893, they open up the Gettysburg Electric Railway. Immediately, veterans are concerned. The trolley runs through some of the most sacred areas of the battlefield. They conned Samuel Wiley Crawford into selling them a right of way across the base of Little Round Top. They were able to purchase land from Tipton at Devil's Den. They were able to run around the wheat field. And they went right down the Emmitsburg Road. They got the approval of Cumberland Township to do that through some negotiation. And people were stunned by it when it opened up. I mean, it ran sometimes within 20 or 30 feet of a monument that had just been dedicated on the site of where that unit fought. Eventually, it was condemned. Now, it was condemned in 1896. But the federal government did not buy it until 1916. So it ran for like 30 years. So, is that right? 60, maybe 20 years. I added wrong. 20 years. Okay. But you can see, here's some advertisements for it. Extended 10 miles over the battlefield, reaching all the points of historic interest. So again, you fight with yourself over these things, I'm sure, at the time. So they're going to bring visitors to the battlefield, but to bring the people here, we have to destroy the battlefield and put a trolley on it. But it's the same thing with the War Department later. The War Department wants to preserve the battlefield, but to get the people of Little Round Top, we have to put an intersection right on the side of Little Round Top and tear the hill apart so we can get visitors there. So, it's really tough sometimes to make these decisions, but the trolley is just, again, making money off of people.
Could you go back to that one more, please? I want to look at the stops.
Oh, National Cemetery, Meade's headquarters, Peach Orchard. Now, see what they did is they went to the National Cemetery and then they cut across the Evergreen Cemetery. And then they came out on the Town Road, went to Meade's headquarters. The stop for Meade's headquarters is really at Ziegler's Grove. And then they went over across private property around the park to the Town or Emmitsburg Road, and then went down the Emmitsburg Road to the Peach Orchard, Wheatfield, Devil's Den, Little Round Top. For the first year of the trolley's existence, they were able to use the Gettysburg-Harrisburg Railroad from Little Round Top back across to the Emmitsburg Road. But that contract fell apart, and for most of its existence, it went to Little Round Top, turned around, and went back the other way. In the busy season, they had 6 cars on the track at one time. And they had to design siding so a car could pull over and let another one by. But they weren't very good at that. And several times, trolleys ran into each other. Trolleys accidentally ran over townspeople in town. They can't stop. They don't stop really quickly, So... But you got to get out of the way. So here's a pass from the Electric Railway Company. Edward Hoffer, who signed it, president. This is from 1893. This is the first. Look, number 79. This is like a pass. One of the first ones given out. We have that in Historical Society. They had tickets, and this ticket features a picture of the power plant that was on Railroad Street, near Washington Street. And then we have lots of advertisements. Here's in 1899. One thing I should say is that after the trolley got condemned, Mr. Hoffer sold it. And it changed hands several times. And everybody kept buying it because they knew that there was $30,000 that was going to come to the owner of the company when the federal government finally passed a bill to give money for the condemnation. And if they didn't, you could run the trolley and make money off the tourists for a while. So it wasn't purchased until 1916. The Gettysburg Transit Company ran it for many years. I look up at the top. Direct route over the battlefield, cars running every 15 minutes. And again, they have the stops. But see, it says Little Round Top. See, it doesn't go, well, it does say high watermark, but they're dropping you off at like the Emmitsburg Road. And then here, if you want to see pictures of the trolley, I have accumulated a bunch of photographs of it. So, the people on who are listening at home, they can't see these photographs.
I'm sorry, was that Plum Run?
They'll have to Google them. Yes, it was Plum Run. These are some of my rare photographs.
He's going through the prison, so you can't take a shot.
That's right. Yeah. I like that one. I got that one. This is like the Gettysburg Railroad Company. See, it's kind of an interesting view of the side of the car. If you don't know, the cars were named after generals, like the Sickles, the Meade. I forget, I have in my book on Devil's Den, I have the names of all the cars.
Hancock?
Yeah, I think there's a Hancock. The one I just passed, a Hancock, I think. Let's see. I think one of them you can see the name on it. Yeah, what's that on the front there? Oh, that's Howard. That's the Howard. But Gary has a view of the Hancock. There it is. There it is. This one I got from a 1903 tour book. This is really rare. I think I'm the only one with that one, unless somebody shoots it real quick. And it appears in drawings around town. There it is in front of the Round Top Museum. And I have a bit clearer version of that at the Historical Society. But, somebody wanted to get their group photograph and taken in front. These things could hold 60 people. And they would take people from the train station, obviously, in town, and then out around the battlefield.
Like a Decker.
Yeah, like the double decker. And they were there during the 1913 reunion. That's one of the worst accidents. In 1913, there was 2 cars hit near Devil's Den, and people were severely injured. And like I said, there were a couple deaths. Here's interesting. This is one of their winter cars. They had their winter cars because, it's cold. And they still want to run it when it's cold. So this is the outside of the winter car, and they have all these guys sitting on top of the car. And these same guys appear in this next photograph inside the car. Look at how it has a stove in it to keep you warm inside as you drive around the battlefield, and the tour guide gives you a tour. Oh, should I mention that you can ride the trolley, or you can ride the trolley with a guide for an extra fee. And the guy tells you about the battle. Okay, so our next subject is going to be a couple of things about the amusement parks. But we're going to stop right there and take a break, because I know I'm running on and on and on. So, and while we take our break, we'll do our raffle first. Does Andy have the raffle thing? Okay. And then when we take our break, then you got to buy some more drinks there. Homework for you guys to do. Look for stuff. Okay, so we're gonna start again. So I can try to finish in a timely fashion. I think I said I had 3 subjects left. I have some amusement park stuff, some battlefield tour guide stuff, and some Devil's Den photographer stuff. Maybe this is the same. So you might notice that there were amusement parks around the battlefield, and really the amusement parks started as a result of the trolley. Actually, the first one was the Gettysburg-Harrisburg Railroad. So the Gettysburg-Harrisburg Railroad came into Gettysburg starting in 1884, and it came in from the north through the Apple Country, and of course they built what we refer to as the Western Maryland Railroad Station there at the college on North Washington Street. That railroad was a huge improvement to help our tourist industry, because that Gettysburg-Hanover Junction Railroad was not very well built. And now people could come in from Harrisburg on this nice railroad from the north. And the railroad was used by the people in northern Adams County to ship apples and fruit to the markets across the East Coast. But tourists came in on it. And the Gettysburg-Harrisburg Railroad built a spur from near the college out across the field of Pickett's Charge to the backside of Little Round Top. And it opened up a amusement park on the backside of Little Round Top in 1884 in the spring. It actually opened up on July 4th, 1884. And an amusement park on the backside of Little Round Top was there until the 1890s. And probably around till about 1900. And then the Rosensteel family built a building and a museum and a little park beside it, and then they sort of took over the name after a while, of Round Top Park. And you can see they call this in the advertisement Little Round Top Hall. The Rosensteels first opened up a building near the Round Top Park in 1886. And you can see in this advertisement, I forget what year, I don't think I know the year of this, but you can see trolley cars direct to the place. And then, of course, when the trolley was put in 1893, at first it only ran over to the wheat field, and they had an amusement park in Weibel's Woods. And then eventually they connected around to Little Round Top in 1894. And then the Rosensteels were able to advertise. And that photograph I showed you, the trolley car sitting on the in front of the museum with all the people in the view, that was at the Rosensteels Museum. Of course, John H. Rosensteel opened up the Rosensteel Museum at Little Round Top, and then in the 1920s, they built the modern building out here on Cemetery Hill that we call our visitor center for many, many years. And that was run by, off the top of my head, his nephew, George Rosensteel, I forget how it works, and his wife, and eventually also the Eckerts. But the Rosensteel Museum started out there. And you can see originally they have a little museum, but they have a dance hall, and you know they're making meals. It's a place to try goes to, which is fascinating. Now, the Gettysburg-Harrisburg Railroad, here's an advertisement for the Round Top Park, which opened in 1884. Situated at Little Round Top on the line of the Round Top branch of the Gettysburg and Harrisburg Railroad. Historically interesting, oh, that's nice, and most conveniently arranged grounds for picnics and excursions. Large dancing pavilion, public kitchen, tables, swings, and all the necessary buildings for the accommodation and convenience of the patrons. Good restaurant on the grounds. Isn't that interesting? They had a lot there in the woods on the backside of Little Round Top.
And good water.
A lot of people don't think about it. Now, William H. Tipton, the local photographer, he had been a little boy here, and he had catered to some of the tourists in the area with the Tyson brothers, and then eventually he took over the studio. And in 1884, when they opened up Round Top Park, he put a tintype gallery at Round Top Park. Do you see at the bottom it says Battlefield Bazaar at Round Top Park? And he started taking photographs of people at Round Top Park. And as far as I know, I was the first person to ever read this biograph of William Tipton. Notice he had a photographic tintype gallery at Round Top Park. And I said to myself, I wonder if there are any photographs that I could find around town of the Round Top Park tintype gallery. And so I, at a time when no one else had knew anything about this, went around antique stores and looked at every tintype I could find in an antique store in the region. And I put together a massive collection of tintypes that show rocks. And then I took my tintypes onto the backside of Little Round Top with a mirror, because you know, a tintype is a backwards image. So I held the mirror in one hand, held the tintype, and I looked and see if I could find the rocks. And I found the location of William Tipton's tintype gallery by doing this. Okay, maybe this was a little much. The one on the left, though, was actually from the Adams County Historical Society, because later I worked at the Historical Society, and I looked through their collection and found examples. See, the thing with the tintype, there's nothing written on the back, unless you get really lucky. The one on the left is Sally Myers, the nurse from High Street during the battle, and her sister, and then her son with the Civil War uniform and rifle and bayonet. He's a reenactor.
Henry Stewart.
Henry Stewart.
That's Henry Stewart.
That's Henry Stewart.
Okay.
And it says on it, it says on the image, it says, opening of Round Top Park, July 4th, 1884. So this one on the left was taken the first day. Now on the right, that is also Henry Stewart and his friend sitting on a rock. And that photograph, that one is mentioned in Henry Stewart's reminiscence. And 4 years later, in 1888, he started working for William Tipton at the Tintype Gallery at Round Top Park. So he works there. And these are the cameramen, I forget his friend's name, at the gallery. Oh, we're going to go guess on it.
Can you tell us where that building was?
Sure. There's a big, gigantic rock at the site of the building. And this is Henry Stewart also in front of that rock. So I simply took that photograph onto the backside of Little Round Top and found that rock. And you can too. So this rock is in my Devil's Den book. For the listeners who might be listening on, they're probably angry now because they can't see the photographs. But you can go to the Devil's Den book that I wrote, and there's a section on Round Top Park, and I have this image on the left with Henry Stort in that book, and then you can take it out to Little Round Top. You can find it. Do you know how many rocks I looked at? Okay, so here's what's really neat about this. I think is neat about this story.
So he's about 17, right? Born in like 1868 or thereabouts.
I think I forget. You're right. 68, 69,
67 or 68.
Yeah. No, I think 68. I think you're right. And this is 88.
Okay. All right.
So he's like 20.
So he's 20. Okay.
Yeah, if that's right. And then on the right, that's kind of hard to see, but I got that out of the Cult Family album. Can you see that tree's the same tree? That they're sitting on the same rock. I became really interested in this rock. And then I found this photograph, and guess what? This is the same rock from the other side, from a different angle. And look, just to show you that I actually did find it.
Andrew didn't have a beard.
Andrew was not happy. Come on, Andrew. We're going out to the rock. I need a modern image of the rock. I think he's trying to give the expression of the guy in the front. Do you see the dance? Or see the banquet hall or something down there and the picnic tables? Isn't it awesome? So I had to, in this one you see I switched it around. I turned it around. And then one day, someone came to the historical society and said, "Hey, I have pictures of my great-grandfather." I think he said, "On the battlefield." I'm like, "Yes, he is." Look at that. They had two images of it. The same rock. And then I went to Cooperstown, New York. I took my son to the Baseball Hall of Fame, and I'm walking in there, and they have a thing on the Negro Leagues. And I turn the corner, and I look, and there's a photograph. It's the same rock. And I was so excited. I had the photographs of that rock on my phone. So I went down to the curator, and I was like, "Wow, look!" And they had it labeled as like Carlisle, Pennsylvania, something like that. And I was like, "That's Round Top Park at Gettysburg," and I know the years it could have been taken. And they could care less. I emailed them later, told them the whole story. They could care less.
That's why it's a baseball museum and not a history.
But eventually, they told the guy who owned the photograph, who lent it to them, and he was super excited. So I did. I don't have a nice view of the thing in my shirt. They had this thing blown up to like 6 or 8 feet. So this is a guy who played for the Carlisle Negro League baseball team in the 1880s. Pretty neat find. Now, they didn't use the same rock. Often they used other rocks. And so I have views of people in front of other rocks. Yeah. So you can find all these things if you look at them. Now, there's also amusement park at Devil's Den, and they had a tintype gallery. Now, this tintype gallery there was run by the Mumpers, the competition to William Tipton. Levi Mumper was a Civil War veteran, so he's older than Tipton. Tipton was a little boy during the battle, and Levi Mumper opened up a photographic studio on West Middle Street in 1864. He moved on to Baltimore Street. He was in that Danner Museum place for a while. He moved to Littlestown and moved back to Gettysburg. But his son, Jacob Mumper, ran the photographic tintype gallery at Devil's Den. And that's Jacob Mumper on the right. And his future wife, Kitzmiller, I believe, Ida Kitzmiller. I'll get some of these names mixed up, but there she is next to him. And here's a photograph of Jacob Mumper and his wife or future wife and her friends inside the tintype gallery. Now, a tintype gallery normally has a screen that you pull down, just like the slide screen. And it has like the ocean on it. And then you pull down another screen, and it has a mountain scene. And you pull down another scene. Here, he had a blank backdrop. But I was able to figure out that he painted the backdrop, and I was able to find photographs of the same set of rocks with different people sitting on them with the backstop, or the painted background. And once I knew what the painted background looked like, and they moved it, it was pretty long, and so they could have, there's like a Devil's Den sort of feature in the back left. But I was able to find this over and over again. And then they took photographs outside the Devil's Den tintype gallery. And these people are both sitting on the same rock, and I was able to find that rock. I have the largest collection of Devil's Den and Little Round Top tintypes known to exist. As a matter of fact, I don't even know if anybody else even has one. Or if they do, they don't really care. Eric Dorr has a couple of them. That's right. He had an album with some of them, and I pointed it out to him. So he has them up in his museum there. Now, in 1889, Jacob Mumper went into business with a guy named Gelback. Off the top of my head, I think it's William Gelback. And you can read about this in my Devil's Den book. For 1 year they're in business. Gelback was a pain in the butt, caused a bunch of problems, and eventually Jacob Mumper got tired of dealing with Gelback and sold out to him for $500. And then, unbeknownst to the Mumpers, Gelback had a silent business partner named William Tipton. And William Tipton then bought out Gelback, paid for him for a good job done, and now William Tipton owned the studio at Devil's Den. And then William Tipton went on to sell right away to the Trolley Company, and then open up a restaurant and a dance hall, and he opened up Tipton Park. Now, William Tipton is an interesting guy. And, I know lots of descendants of William Tipton. This guy was on the board of the GBMA. He was really interested in the battlefield. And you could argue that he did some things that were beneficial for battlefield preservation. But he was not averse to making a buck off of the tourists. And so he epitomizes everything we're just talking about with commercialization and memorialization, making secret deals. Do you think that he was honest with Samuel Wiley Crawford about the right-of-way he was purchasing across the Valley of Death? Well, Samuel Wiley Crawford's on his deathbed. Crawford's relatives were stunned when they found out that Crawford had signed away to the Trolley Company a right-of-way that would destroy part of Little Round Top. But here's William Tipton with the famous battlefield tour guide, James T. Long, at Devil's Den. Tipton also, you might know, he had a fiery red beard, which is interesting. But he was one of the more prominent businessmen in the town, and he worked for the Tyson brothers initially as a little boy. He was a very hard worker. And here's a business card owned by Sue Boardman from the Tyson brothers. You can see Isaac and Charles Tyson. He was the main photographer in the 60s and then in the 70s when Charles Tyson took over. And eventually, it became William Tipton's photographic company. Here's an amazing photograph we have at the Adams County Historical Society. And this is William Tipton in his office on Chambersburg Street when he moved to the south side of Chambersburg Street. And in this photograph, when you blow it up, he really got into not just the photography of the battlefield, but into the tourist trade with the trinkets and the souvenirs. And there's some of that redware and some dishes. I like, of all the people you're going to have an image of in your office, who are you going to have? Look on the left. George Gordon Meade. That's got to say something, don't you think? And then you might notice, you see those bundles there of photographs? Do you know what they are? And I have to say, I think I've only ever seen one of them. And it was for sale to Horse Soldier. They are large prints that he made of every plaque on the Pennsylvania Monument. There are Pennsylvania Monument plaques made into giant posters for each regiment. And I've seen, like I said, one for sale. There's a book that he did with every plaque in it. And you know, it's a neat book. One day I would like to do a walking tour of the Pennsylvania Monument, because we have the original names before there's scratch outs and before there's additions. If you haven't thought about that, we have that in, and we have that book at Historical Society. So we have access to all the images in that file.
So this is an indoor shot.
Yes. Yeah.
That's pretty impressive.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mumper took it.
So we have lots of advertisement from him. I just wanted to mention here in this one, photographs of lantern slides of every point of interest and monument on the field. Continuously on the field since the Great Battle in July of 1863. And then, of course, his rival, Jacob Mumper, the son of Levi Mumper. And, you know, Jacob Mumper did, Tipton and Mumper both sold postcards. And there's a lot of postcards that you can see in their tour books. So, Mumper's studio, as time went by, was in the Fonostock building. Did you see this 1880s view of the Fonostock building? Look on the roof. Did you see they cut a hole in the roof and put a gigantic window, skylight in the roof for better lighting? And then M.F. Williams. What happened was, eventually there were other photographers in town. And it got so bad on the battlefield where photographers were, fighting with each other to get tourist photographs of them, that in 1895, they started licensing battlefield photographers. Think about that. They licensed battlefield photographers prior to licensing battlefield guys. That's got to say something about the problems, don't you think? M.F. Williams, Max, and he was Marion Francis Williams. And his brother, Charles A. Williams, actually took his experience helping his father, and during the Spanish-American War, he took photographs from a balloon in Puerto Rico. He was an army photographer. And he came back to Gettysburg and opened up the Battlefield Photograph Company. So all these people I mentioned, you can find examples of their work on the internet. And of course, that's why Tipton wanted Devil's Den. That's why he wanted the studio there. Because he started recording thousands of images of visitors in front of Devil's Den. That's John Batchelder sitting there with the Vermont veterans of the battle from Reunion. Between the years 1883 and 1930, there were 8 different photography firms active on the battlefield, by my count. Depends how you count. And I suggest that these photography firms recorded somewhere between 30 and 50,000 images in front of Devil's Den. And you can buy them everywhere, in every flea market in the area. And, I used to pay like $5 for them. I get a kick out of them when I look and they're like $300 or something. They're so plentiful. But I guess it depends on the subject. But here's a Carlisle Indian School with the parents of the students in Devil's Den, with somewhere in there is William D. Holtzworth. Eddie Plank at Devil's Den in 1914. Eddie Plank had some knowledge of the battlefield, and in some accounts they say he gives tours of the battlefield. I don't know if he's probably an early hack driver. Meaning
So is he in the very center with the cap?
Yeah, he's in the very center. What's really interesting about this is after the 1913 World Series, and he's driving a 1914 Oakland. It's the Philadelphia Athletics. That's got to say something, right?
That was his bonus.
And they always, you know how they release the next year's cars in the fall? The same thing then. Yeah. And that was Connie Mack sitting with him. You know, Connie Mack on the right. Now we have lots of images of people at Devil's Den, so I'll just run through them. I know I'll go too quick, but here's we even have colored excursionists there. Here's I like this one. Don't you think that's a great image of the girls hiding behind a rock? I think the photographers at Devil's Den were very creative.
Those are McAllisters.
Yeah, that's right. You knew that. Keith scanned that image for me out of the McAllister album. McAllister girls. And actually, the one girl in there is the Bream, remember? Because our friends related to him. But everybody put on their Sunday best. They went to Devil's Den and had their photograph taken. I like there's a sign behind these guys, Devil's Den. As if you didn't know it was Devil's Den. And maybe your new bicycle, you want to get your new bicycle in the image? I like that one. Here is a 1903 Cadillac. So we start to get cars. You know, there's a whole bunch of car collectors, antique car dealers. They love these Devil's Den views because it's an easy way for them to get photographs of early cars. There's a Battlefield tour guide in the back, Charles Sheets. The Adams County Historical Society has a collection of about 30 photographs with Charles Sheets. And he's a Battlefield tour guide. And they're all different tours. So let me suggest something. The Battlefield tour guys have some kind of deal with William Tipton. They're on their tour. Oh, if we stop here at Devil's Den, you want to have your photograph taken on the battlefield? And it's really great. He'll take our photograph. He'll send it to you. It's a nominal fee. You know, so the Battlefield tour guys has a deal with them. And maybe Tipton makes an extra print and gives it to the tour guide if you encourage the people to have their photograph taken. Can you imagine that?
Is that the same family as Jacob Sheets?
Yes, I forget exactly how Charles H. Sheets is related. He's a veteran of the battle. In the photograph, you can see a scar on his face. He got like a monocracy. I think he's in the 87th. But yes, the photographs were given to the Adams County Historical Society by Colonel Sheets. So he's related somehow. I don't remember off the top of my head. Here's the 2nd Rhode Island, Elijah Hunt Rose at Devil's Den, if you are into the Ken Burns series. That's from the Ken Burns series book, actually. So, you know, it's always interesting to me, these different relationships between the guides and the photographers.
Was there graffiti up there on that rock?
Oh, yeah. So Devil's Den had lots of graffiti on. People knew that the camera were taking photographs of the rock. So they carved their name on that rock, and then your name would appear in the photographs that were taken of the rock from that point after. I noticed the Mumpers had their name on the rock. I don't know if you saw that. There's Charles Sheets taking some women around the battlefield. And, you know, we do have colored excursions to the battlefield. There was a certain day every year, a weekend, where they would put flyers up in Baltimore and Harrisburg and Philadelphia, and it would be the colored excursion day. And black people who weren't normally allowed to ride on the trains would come on that one day to the battlefield. And you can find it in the paper and read about it. And again, it's on a Sunday. Everybody wore their Sunday best. Everybody came. You had your pictures taken. Here on the left at the bottom is their earliest black battlefield tour guide. His name was Penn. He lived on the Tawnytown Road. He married one of the daughters of Basil Biggs. I forget the name. Do you remember his first name? William Penn, maybe? William F. Penn, something like that. But we have stuff from his family. And actually, when I say he's actually right, he's not that. He's right. Oh, it's this guy right here. But he was a battlefield tour guide. We would not have another black, and he passed the first test, I think. We would not have another black battlefield tour guide licensed until like the 1980s. Now, battlefield tour guides, that's the last thing I wanted to talk about, I believe. So, battlefield tour guides, obviously, people are coming to Gettysburg, they need someone to tell them about the battle. So you hire someone, but, you come into the train station, there's all these signs, there's people standing there at the train station, battlefield tour, battlefield tour, battlefield tour. And also, you're not just paying for a tour guide. You're paying for a means of transportation to get you to the Little Round Top. Are you going to walk from the train station to Little Round Top? Of course, now, you can get on the trolley, and you can take the trolley out to Little Round Top, which really probably killed the tour guides. They hated that. But you go to the center of town, and somebody tells you, you got to go to this place, get this tour guide. And so we have tour guides working out of hotels and livery stables. David McConaughey, he lived here during the battle. He was in the town during the fighting. And in December of 1863, he was giving lectures around the country on the battle. So, and David McConaughey, at the end of his lecture, he would bring up his friend. Let me introduce you to someone. John Burns, wearing the outfit that he carried, wore on the battlefield and carrying the musket that he used during the fighting. And he would tell you about what he did while the rest of the cowards were hiding in their basements. And people loved it. Frank Williams, who I believe is Marion Francis Williams, Francis Frank, he was M.F. Williams' father. And he was an early battlefield tour guide. He lived in town. And you see that he fought in the Army in 1861-62. I forget what unit he was in. Maybe like the 9th New York Cavalry. I shouldn't say this because somebody's going to check and be able to figure it out real quick. Yeah. But you see, he's wounded 3 times, he says. And I didn't know this right away, but he was here during the battle. Look, has been a guide since July 1863. Hauled wounded over the field. And I just found a reminiscence by one of his relatives about him. And apparently he came here with the Teamsters and just stayed after the battle. And then his son went on to become a very prominent battlefield photographer. But he was a tour guide. I love that. What do you think of that business card? And early on, the tour guides were veterans. William D. Holdsworth was not at the battle, but he was in the 87th Pennsylvania Infantry. And William Holdsworth was with Jack Skelly when Jack Skelly was wounded. And he was there when Wesley Culp came up. If you remember the account, he says something like, "Hi, Billy." And then he takes him over and points to Skelly, wounded. But he's one of the more famous tour guides. And, Holdsworth, I should say this descriptive lecture, this poster is like 4 foot by 3 foot, and we have the original at the Adams County Historical Society. It's from his great-granddaughter gave it to us. And he wrote a book that was published by the Gettysburg-Harrisburg Railroad Company. And if you buy this book, you will find a story called Piecing Up, about the guy with no arms that carried the guy with no legs across the Valley of Death to obtain water. And other such stories about how the vultures were here during the battle, and those same vultures that were here. Charles Gilbert was in Company K, 1st Pennsylvania Reserves, was here at the Battle of Gettysburg, and after the war, he's a tour guide. So how about that? Tour guides that fought in the battle, giving tours of the battlefield. That's wild. And I think 3 of his sons also were tour guides. And look, he only can be found at the Keystone Hotel, Chambersburg Street, which is the James Geddes Hotel, or I think they just changed the name to the Union Hotel. It had various names in its existence, but that's the Keystone Hotel. And then here is his son, who I think is my favorite tour guide of all time. I know a lot of tour guides too now. This is my favorite. Wayne will be disappointed, Wayne's one of my favorites, and Charlie Fennell. But Professor J. Warren Gilbert. I think it's Joseph Warren Gilbert. But his father was a tour guide and was in the battle. He was born in November of 1863. He was born just a few days after the Gettysburg Address. And he gives tours of the battlefield, and his tour is the best tour of the battlefield, according to him. And he gets in fist fights with other tour guides. I'll never forget at the park there we have like a file of stuff on tour guides and stuff, and he's got like all kinds of demotions and citations because of his fighting with other guides. So, but he wrote a book, and if you pick up his book around town, I love his book. Anyway, if you get an opportunity. John Pitzer on Chambersburg Street was a tour guide, and he had his own house. So this is really interesting. So if you go to John Pitzer, who was in the 165th Pennsylvania Infantry at the time of the Civil War, was not here to battle, but he has a temperance house. So you don't have to worry about people drinking around you and getting all sloppy. But you see, for $1.25, you got to stay at his house. You got a warm bath. He took you around the battlefield. He brought you back. You ate lunch, and you see, including a good substantial dinner. He made a whole day out of it for you, and people loved it. And then here's another advertisement for the Pitzer House. Oh, by the way, this is the second block of Chambersburg Street all the way to so if you get on Chambersburg Street, it's on the north side, it's on the right. So you can see they changed the address, because that would be, no, that was, on that side is odd, okay. Yeah.
Right side is
I don't know if that address is correct, though.
Well, the previous one had Chambersburg Street.
Yeah. Well, did you know that Chambersburg Street was renamed Main Street for a while? Okay. And here he is, John Pitzer. What an awesome photograph. Don't you love it? And here he is. Oh, no. I'm sorry. Another tour guide, Luther Minnick. And again, one of my favorite tour guides. He has his own book. You got to read his book. It's great. He was a little boy during the battle, and he was hiding in his cellar on West Middle Street when his brother, the commander of Company K, 1st Pennsylvania Reserves, came into the basement and visited his family after the fighting was over. He's against the tree on the right. See how he's standing? I think there's an air of authority about him. This is a really bad photograph, but here he is on the left. And that's, I don't think people do that enough anymore, the Napoleonic pose. And here he is with, in the middle, General John B. Gordon. He had General John Gordon on the tour. William Holdsworth had Daniel Sickles and James Longstreet on the tour. And here's look, that was out of order. Here's John Pitzer's book. And you can buy this around town. I see it for sale all the time. Might have to pay $50 for it, but you can buy it around town. Love it. And here, a lot of tour guides started as hack drivers. And you can see here's a collection of hack drivers. And basically, hack drivers were people that drove you around the field. You needed to hire someone in a carriage. And the park started issuing hack driver licenses. Again, we had to have hack driver licenses prior to having licensed battlefield guides. And there's an original hack license. Luther Minnick. Again, I thought I got some of these out of order. Oh, there's his book. I love his book. Have you ever thought about collecting the books by the various tour guides? You wouldn't believe how many I have. Okay, Gettysburg made plain. Here's J. Warren Gilbert. Oh, I didn't mean to put them in this order. William Weibel. So William Weibel buys the Rose Farm. And then he opens up a bed and breakfast at the Rose Farm. And he gives tours out of you stay on the famous wheat field. And he lives there, and he gives you a tour of the field. And, I hate it when people say, oh, I opened up the first bed and breakfast in Gettysburg. Lady says it around town all the time. In the 1980s. I'm sorry. You did not. Here's some tour guides, and you see it says they work out of the City Hotel. And don't worry, I'm almost done, but I have lots of tour guide photos. Look at that thing. That's like a Rolls Royce for visitors to go around the field in.
Van rate for that, I guess, right?
Yeah. The Hotel Gettysburg livery, Holtzworth and Hoffman. See, each of the different tour guides worked out of a livery stable. Because you have to have a way to get around. What are you going to do, walking tours? In the winter? Samuel Hartzell. Someone was telling me that Samuel Hartzell was officially the first licensed battlefield guide. So you can see, this guy, 40 years of experience on the field. Samuel Hartzell, his brother was in Company B, or Company G maybe, 138th Pennsylvania, and died at the Battle of Sailor's Creek. And in 1915, they licensed battlefield guides. And Sue Boardman, bless her heart, collects business cards from licensed battlefield guides. And she says all these are from the 1915 class. And then there were unlicensed guides. We always have that issue. This guy, yeah. So he's a taxi driver, but he doesn't, he puts on his business card. Yeah. They've always had that problem, too, where people just get in tours. And, I thought I'd throw up there the original guide uniform. It was like a tan, a brownish tan. And that's, this guy is Harry T. Long, who was a licensed battlefield guide. And his father was James T. Long, the famous battlefield tour guide. All the tour guides are famous, you might notice. But I just thought you see one, and I think that's done for tonight. Now I have another part of this slideshow that's just as long, and it's about all the modern commercialism in Gettysburg, starting in the 1950s, prior to the centennial, up through more the present day. So you have to come to that one in January. I think it might be the second week in January I'm doing that one, and that one will cover such things as the National Tower, the Lee Mead Inn, the Home Sweet Home, and every just tourist attraction that I can think of, including the International Village, right? Yeah. So lots of useless information there. So if you have any questions you want to ask me, you can ask me here after we finish the program, but I want to end so that some of you can get out of here in a timely fashion. Okay.
Are you going next week?
I think so. I would say yes, but you have to wait and see if Wednesday I have an advertisement.
Okay.
There's variables I never know, but I would say yes.
Okay.
I just haven't announced the January topics yet. Okay?
Very good. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Put together that file for the Robinson
That was Tim Smith's lecture on early commercialization in Gettysburg. Join us next week and every week, almost, unless for some reason Tim doesn't do a lecture, for the lectures of Timothy Smith, licensed battlefield guide, historian, and frequent guest on Addressing Gettysburg. We thank you for listening, and we remind you that this is made possible because of patrons. And if you care to see video, then become a patron. Put your money where your brave keyboard fingers are. Thank you.
Charlie Rose, who's a tour guide, on his tour, he'd be like, he'd stop up here in Steinway and he'd be like,